when hotel security rushed into Suite 434 at the Beverly Hilton on February 11th, 2012, they found America's voice face down in a bathtub filled with scalding water. But what they discovered next would haunt investigators for years. It was supposed to be a celebration. Clive Davis's legendary pre-Grammy party was scheduled for that evening at the Beverly Hilton Hotel in Beverly Hills, and Whitney Houston was expected to attend. The 48-year-old icon had been staying in Suite 434, surrounded by her entourage of family, friends, and assistants. But something was wrong, and everyone around her knew it. In the days leading up to February 11th, Houston's behavior had become increasingly erratic. Hotel staff reported seeing her skipping around the ballroom, doing handstands near the pool, appearing disheveled in mismatched clothes with dripping wet hair. At rehearsals on Thursday, Grammy personnel had expressed concern when Houston danced off camera, tried to make performers laugh while journalists were present. They didn't want her caught on camera. They were afraid of what people would write about her behavior. But now, as the clock ticked toward 3:30 p.m. on that Saturday afternoon, Whitney Houston was running out of time. Wait, because what happened the next 40 minutes would spark a mystery that investigators still debate today. At 3:15 p.m., Whitney Houston was on the phone with her mother, Cissy Houston. Everything seemed fine, just a normal mother-daughter conversation. Houston's assistant had left the suite to run errands at a nearby store, picking up items Whitney needed for the evening's party. The superstar was alone in her hotel room. Less than 30 minutes later, at 3:43 p.m., the assistant returned to the suite. What she found would change everything. Whitney Houston was face down in the bathtub, submerged in water, completely unresponsive. The assistant immediately called hotel security. Beverly Hills paramedics arrived around 3:30 p.m. and found Houston unconscious. They performed CPR, desperately trying to revive the music legend. Police officers arrived at 3:45 p.m., just 2 minutes after the call, because they were already at the hotel preparing security for Clive Davis's party. At 3:55 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, Whitney Houston was pronounced dead. But here's what doesn't add up. If Houston's assistant left around 3:15 p.m. and returned at 3:43 p.m., that's only 28 minutes. In that impossibly short window, Whitney Houston had somehow filled a bathtub with water, gotten in, and drowned. The bathwater was described as extremely hot by first responders, raising an immediate question. Who fills a bathtub with scalding hot water and then gets in? The crime scene told a disturbing story. When investigators entered Suite 434, they found a chaotic tableau that suggested Houston's final hours were anything but peaceful. The bathroom counter was covered with prescription medication bottles, 12 different prescriptions in total, including Xanax, Valium, and other sedatives. A white powdery substance was found on a bathroom counter along with a rolled-up piece of paper. A spoon with a white crystal-like substance was discovered near the bathtub. Burn marks were visible on the counter surface. The bathtub itself held only about 12 inches of water, roughly 1 foot deep, yet a grown woman had drowned in it. This detail would become one of the most controversial aspects of the entire investigation. You don't just drown in a foot of water unless something catastrophic happens to your body first. And investigators were about to discover exactly what that was. The autopsy report released on April 4th, 2012, revealed findings that only deepened the mystery. The official cause of death was listed as accidental drowning, but that wasn't the whole story. The report stated that effects of atherosclerotic heart disease and cocaine use were contributing factors. Cocaine was found in Houston's system, though the amount wasn't immediately disclosed. The coroner also noted that Houston had 60% narrowing of her arteries, severe atherosclerotic heart disease for a 48-year-old woman. Burns were found on Houston's back, consistent with someone lying against the scalding hot bathtub surface for an extended period. A small perforation was discovered in her nasal septum, indicating chronic cocaine use. But here's what shocked even seasoned investigators. Toxicology results showed Houston had marijuana, Xanax, Flexeril, a muscle relaxer, and Benadryl in her system along with the cocaine. It was a deadly cocktail of substances that would impair anyone's judgment and motor functions. Yet the official ruling remained accidental drowning, with contributing factors. Beverly Hills Police Department closed the case on April 11, 2012, announcing there was no evidence of foul play. But that's when the questions really started. The timeline investigators presented to the public had serious gaps that armchair detectives and Houston's family immediately noticed. If Houston was on the phone with her mother at 3:15 p.m. and seemed fine, what happened in the next 28 minutes that led to her death? Houston's assistant claimed she left the suite briefly and returned to find Houston unresponsive. But hotel security footage and witness statements suggested the assistant may have been gone longer than initially reported. Staff members reported seeing the assistant in the hotel lobby and gift shop during a time frame that didn't match her official statement. Even more puzzling, why did Houston draw a bath with water hot enough to cause burns on her skin? The bathwater temperature was estimated to be around 93.5 degrees Fahrenheit when first responders arrived, which means it had been even hotter when initially drawn. No one voluntarily gets into water that hot, especially not someone about to attend a major Hollywood party in just a few hours. And then there's the cocaine question that investigators never fully addressed. If Houston used cocaine shortly before or during her bath, the stimulant combined with the hot water and her pre-existing heart condition could have caused a cardiac event. But the positioning of the white powder and the spoon suggested drug use had occurred at the bathroom counter, not in the tub. So when did she use it? And did someone else know about it? What investigators found in the suite raised even more uncomfortable questions about who was in that room and when. Despite the official story of Houston being alone during that critical 28-minute window, hotel staff reported unusual activity on the fourth floor that afternoon. A housekeeper claimed to have heard raised voices coming from Suite 434 around 3 p.m., just 15 minutes before Houston's mother said they spoke on the phone. That same housekeeper reported seeing a man who wasn't part of Houston's official entourage entering the suite earlier that morning. Security footage from the hallway was reviewed, but key portions from that afternoon were reportedly corrupted or showed nothing of interest according to the police report. How convenient that the footage covering the exact time period when Houston died happened to be unusable. Ray Watson, Houston's bodyguard, was reportedly in the hotel but not stationed directly outside her suite that afternoon, an unusual departure from protocol for a celebrity of Houston's magnitude. When questioned, Watson gave conflicting statements about his exact location during the critical time frame. Houston's hairstylist and makeup artist were also in the hotel preparing for the evening's events, and both had access to her suite. Yet neither was thoroughly questioned about whether they saw or heard anything unusual that afternoon. The prescription medications found in the bathroom presented their own mystery. 12 different prescriptions were discovered, but only some of them were in Houston's name. Who did the other medications belong to, and why were they in her bathroom? The Beverly Hilton Hotel's response to the tragedy raised additional red flags that conspiracy theorists would seize upon. Within hours of Houston's death being announced, Clive Davis made the controversial decision to proceed with his pre-Grammy party that evening. The party went on in a ballroom just floors below where Houston's body was being removed by the coroner. Davis addressed the crowd, saying Whitney would have wanted the music to go on. But many observers found it ghoulish that champagne was flowing and celebrities were partying while Houston's body was barely cold. The hotel itself seemed eager to move past the tragedy quickly. Suite 434 was thoroughly cleaned and put back into rotation within weeks. Any potential physical evidence that might have been missed in the initial investigation was wiped away forever. Hotel management refused to provide detailed records of who had access to Houston's floor that day, citing guest privacy concerns. Security tapes that weren't corrupted were never released to the public despite repeated requests from journalists and Houston's family. The speed at which the Beverly Hills Police Department closed the case also struck many as suspiciously hasty. Less than 2 months after Houston's death, police declared there was no evidence of criminal activity and closed the investigation. No charges were filed, no one was held accountable for the prescription medications that weren't in Houston's name, and the inconsistencies in witness statements were never publicly explained. Houston's family members were never satisfied with the official explanation and publicly questioned the investigation's thoroughness. Bobby Christina Brown, Houston's daughter, told friends she believed her mother's death wasn't accidental. In the years following Houston's death, Brown would make cryptic social media posts suggesting she knew more about what happened that day than she could safely reveal. Tragically, Brown herself would die in eerily similar circumstances just 3 years later. Found unconscious in a bathtub in her Georgia home on January 31, 2015. She never regained consciousness and died on July 26, 2015, at age 22. The similarities between mother and daughter's deaths were impossible to ignore and fueled speculation about a possible pattern or connection. Cissy Houston, Whitney's mother, gave carefully worded interviews in which she expressed disappointment with how the investigation was handled. While never directly accusing anyone, Cissy made it clear she felt there were unanswered questions and suggested that people close to Whitney may have enabled her destructive behavior or worse. Whitney's brother, Gary Houston, was more direct in his criticism, stating publicly that he believed the investigation was rushed and that key evidence was ignored. He pointed specifically to the inconsistencies in the timeline and the mysterious gap in security footage. The Houston family hired their own private investigators, but by the time they became involved, the crime scene had been contaminated and crucial evidence destroyed. The autopsy findings themselves became a subject of intense scrutiny and debate among forensic experts. Dr. Michael Baden, a renowned forensic pathologist, reviewed the coroner's report at the request of media outlets and noted several troubling aspects. The combination of cocaine, alcohol, and prescription sedatives in Houston's system created what Baden called a potentially lethal cocktail that could have caused a cardiac event or seizure. If Houston had a seizure or heart attack while in the tub, she would have lost consciousness almost instantly, explaining how she could drown in such shallow water. However, Baden noted that the burns on Houston's back suggested she remained in the hot water for some time after losing consciousness, possibly 10 to 20 minutes. This raised the disturbing question: if someone had been in the suite or checked on her during that window, she might have been saved. The 60% blockage in Houston's arteries was also unusual for someone her age who wasn't diagnosed with heart disease. This level of atherosclerosis typically develops over many years and would likely have caused symptoms that should have been medically addressed. Either Houston was experiencing symptoms and ignoring them, or she was unaware of her heart condition, both scenarios that her doctor should have caught. The small perforation in her nasal septum confirmed chronic cocaine use, contradicting Houston's public claims in later years that she had beaten her addiction. This revelation suggested that people close to Houston, family, friends, management, either didn't know about her continued drug use or were actively covering it up. The prescription drug angle opened up an entirely separate avenue of investigation that was never fully pursued. 12 prescription bottles were found in Houston's bathroom, but only some were legally prescribed to her. The medications included Xanax, Valium, Flexeril, ibuprofen, and several others, many of which should not be mixed, especially not with cocaine and alcohol. Who prescribed these medications? And were Houston's various doctors aware she was taking such a dangerous combination? There's no evidence that Beverly Hills police ever coordinated with the DEA or medical licensing boards to investigate whether Houston's prescriptions were being properly managed. This was particularly troubling given the recent high-profile case of Michael Jackson, who died just 3 years earlier from a prescription drug overdose administered by his personal physician. The entertainment industry's prescription drug problem was well known by 2012, yet Houston's case seemed to get a pass on this critical issue. The medications that weren't in Houston's name were never traced to their source. Were they prescribed to someone in her entourage who was sharing them with her? Were they obtained illegally? Were they brought to the hotel by someone who visited her suite that day? These questions remained unanswered when the case was closed. The white powdery substance and spoon found near the bathtub were confirmed to be cocaine through laboratory testing, but the investigation into its source went nowhere. Who provided the cocaine to Houston, and when did it enter the hotel room? Hotel security supposedly screened guests and packages, yet illegal drugs made it into a celebrity's suite without detection. If someone brought drugs to Houston that afternoon, that person was potentially the last one to see her alive. Ray Watson, her bodyguard, insisted he wasn't aware of any drug use that day, but his conflicting statements about his whereabouts made his testimony questionable. Houston's assistant similarly claimed ignorance about the cocaine, despite being responsible for managing Houston's day-to-day activities. The idea that no one in Houston's immediate circle knew she was using cocaine strains credulity given the physical evidence of chronic use found during autopsy. More likely, people around Houston knew about her drug problem, but either enabled it through inaction or actively participated by procuring substances for her. This wasn't just about Whitney Houston making poor personal choices. It was about a system of handlers, assistants, and enablers who failed to protect her from herself. The timing of Houston's death, the evening before the Grammy Awards in a hotel full of music industry executives, struck many observers as tragically symbolic. Houston's career had been in decline for years, struggling with vocal problems, drug addiction, and tabloid scandals. Her last album hadn't performed well commercially, and there was industry speculation about whether she could ever reclaim her former glory. The Grammy weekend was supposed to be part of her comeback strategy, be seen at major industry events, remind people of her legendary status, generate buzz for future projects. Instead, the weekend became a memorial to a fallen icon. Clive Davis's decision to continue with his party that night, despite Houston's death, exemplified the industry's complicated relationship with its troubled stars. The show must go on, even when one of your biggest stars dies under mysterious circumstances just floors away. Cynics pointed out that Houston's death actually generated massive publicity for the Grammy telecast the next night, which opened with a tribute to her. Album sales spiked immediately after her death, with Houston's greatest hits collection selling more copies in the week following her death than in the previous year combined. There's no suggestion that anyone wanted Houston dead, but her death was certainly profitable for the record labels, the Grammys, and the various entities that owned her music catalog. The role of the media in covering Houston's death also raised ethical questions about how society treats celebrities in crisis. In the days before her death, paparazzi photos showed Houston looking disheveled and troubled, fueling tabloid speculation about her sobriety. Some publications seemed almost gleeful in documenting her apparent relapse, treating her struggles as entertainment rather than tragedy. When Houston died, those same outlets that had mocked her addiction suddenly pivoted to reverent tributes and hand-wringing about the pressures of fame. The hypocrisy was stunning. The media helped create the environment that destroyed Houston, then profited from her death. Photographers camped outside the Beverly Hilton for days, capturing images of Houston's body being removed, her family arriving in grief, and morbid tourists taking selfies at the death site. Within hours of the death announcement, someone leaked crime scene photos to gossip websites, showing Houston's body in the tub covered by a sheet. The leak violated basic dignity protocols and potentially compromised the investigation, yet no one was ever charged with releasing the photos. The tabloid coverage focused obsessively on Houston's drug use and troubled relationship with Bobby Brown, largely ignoring the unanswered questions about the circumstances of her death. It was easier to write Houston off as just another celebrity drug casualty than to examine whether she had been failed by the people and systems meant to protect her. 12 years later, the official explanation remains unchanged. Whitney Houston accidentally drowned in her bathtub on February 11, 2012, with cocaine use and heart disease as contributing factors. But the case file tells a different story, one filled with gaps, inconsistencies, and ignored evidence. The rushed investigation, the destroyed evidence, the conflicting witness statements, and the convenient loss of security footage all suggest that someone wanted this case closed quickly. Whether it was to protect a hotel's reputation, shield someone in Houston's entourage from scrutiny, or simply avoid the expense and PR nightmare of a prolonged investigation, we may never know. What we do know is that America lost one of its greatest voices under circumstances that were never fully explained. Whitney Houston deserved better than to die alone in a bathtub filled with scalding water, surrounded by pills and powder, while the people paid to protect her were somewhere else. She deserved better than an investigation that prioritized convenience over truth. And her family deserved better than vague official answers that left them wondering what really happened in Suite 434 that February afternoon. The bathtub mystery remains unsolved, not because the evidence wasn't there, but because no one with the power to demand answers seemed interested in asking the right questions. In the end, Whitney Houston became another cautionary tale about fame, addiction, and the price of stardom, when the Real story might be much darker than anyone wanted to admit.